I'd like to introduce Grace Miksha. She's the lifestyle consultant at Parkland and the Glen, and she'll be hosting our session. And I will maybe disappear from your screen for a little while. So handing over to Grace.
Thank you, Winnie. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Parkland Live special series. Today, you signed up because we'll be talking about senior living options, starting the conversation with our guests, Esther Goldstein and Paul Cutajar of Senior Care Access. I'm your host, Grace Miksha, your lifestyle consultant here at Parkland on the Glen in Mississauga. Before we begin the conversation with Esther and Paul, I just wanted to first introduce Shanix RLC to those who may not be familiar with us. So actually, Shanix is owned and operated, Parkland is owned and operated by Shanix, which is family owned, a maritime-based company with over 30 years experience providing compassionate and personalized services and care to every one of our residents. Our vision is around leading the way to better living. And we do this by providing exceptional service through our full continuum of lifestyle options, providing peace of mind to our residents and their families for as long as they call Parkland home. Now, Parkland operates 16 retirement communities in Ontario, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. So that's a little bit about RLC. If you have any more questions, we can take those at the end. But let me now introduce you to our guest speakers. Esther Goldstein is the owner of Senioropolis, Inc., a part-time lifestyle 55 plus network, and lead consultant and trainer for the SCA consulting program. Esther obtained a bachelor degree in the science from the University of Toronto in 1986 and in social work from Ryerson University in 1990. She is a registered member of the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers. Esther has worked as a hospital social worker in the Greater Toronto Area for 12 years, primarily with the geriatric population. Esther also is a part-time faculty member of Seneca College, where she teaches the course, The Retirement Home Industry, Overview and Skills, and the Social Service Work Gerontology Program. In 2017, Esther started to expand Senioropolis through the development of seniorcareaccess.com. And in 2019, Esther and Paul incorporated Lifestyle 55 Network Inc. in order to expand the Senioropolis reach as well as to offer a new level of services to professionals and families. So that then brings us to Paul. So Paul is a master accredited senior agent, seniors real estate. He's a certified executor advisor and partner of Lifestyle 55 Plus and Pivotal Aging Innovations, Inc. After years of working in the seniors real estate industry as an accredited senior agent and Canada's first master accredited senior agent, Paul and his associates integrated many of the courses and programs relating to seniors. So, with further ado, I would like to pass it over to Paul and Esther. Well, they'll talk more about how to start the conversation.
Excellent. Thanks, Grace. Hello, Esther. Hello, everyone.
Hey, Paul.
Beautiful sunny day here. So wherever you're calling in from, I hope your day is starting out very good. Again, thank you for that introduction and the time that you've offered to share with us. We are going to be discussing today about having the conversation, and I am just going to share my screen. And I just want to make sure everybody can see that screen.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So today we're going to be talking about having the conversation. That conversation might be about future planning, might be about caregiving, improving your quality of life, could be about housing.
I can't see your screen, sorry.
You can't see my screen?
No.
Oh, let's try again.
There.
How about
Now
now?
we can see your screen.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
So we're still having the same conversation, and that was a great piece of having good communication, right? So again, today on that conversation, you may be here as a mom, as a dad, you may be here as an adult child, you may be here as a business professional. And the idea of having the conversation really falls upon what is that conversation. So depending on where you are, as far as that, the process of having conversations with your family members, It all depends on where you want that to go and how you're going to set that up. And we're going to cover a lot of that today. So the first piece that we're going to talk about on the conversation, let's just scroll through here, is really understanding the other person's position, right? So we've broken this down as the senior or the parent versus the adult child or children and or a friend. And if you think about all the changes that might be happening in our lives, right? So as we get older, we look at the things that we used to do quite easily that are now becoming a little bit more challenging. And that happens to all of us, right? Our neighbors and our friends are changing. Perhaps they're moving away. Perhaps they're no longer with us. Perhaps they've moved in and moved on with things. Our house, the property that we've been in for so many years, the house may now be becoming more of a challenge to manage. We have stairs, we have the cleaning of the house, we have cooking issues, bathing issues, taxes, lawn maintenance, all of that. Then we are talking about isolation and lower activity levels. Perhaps you're caring for a partner. These are all life changes that either happen to us or will happen to us. So it's really important to try to understand the other person's position when we're presenting the conversation. So let's take a look at what that senior or that parent side, what their position or their concerns are. So I think we can all agree that we would want to be independent. So that parent is still trying to maintain their independence. They have wants and needs, right? They want to be respected. They want autonomy. They want their privacy. They still want to save money. They don't want to, spend all of their money because you never want your money to outlive yourself. There may be a feeling of attachment to your current home. I've worked my life and this is our home and I'm not going to leave the home. And that poses too many of those challenges that I mentioned earlier. Perhaps there's guilt or attachment after the passing of a partner, right? We've worked our lives to have what we have. I may no longer be here, but I don't want you to lose the things that we have, right? And there's that, sometimes that conversation that puts a little bit of pressure on the surviving partner. We're all fearful of change. None of us like change. It's always a challenge. The older we get, anytime we have something that's offering a difference to what we're used to, it becomes a bit of a more of a challenge, right? And we're looking for the quality of life, right? And then there's one thing that comes up often, but a lot of people don't coin the term, and it's actually fear of speaking into existence. Having conversations, people have a tendency to avoid certain conversations because they feel that if they have that type of a conversation, it's going to happen to them. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about having conversations and those discussions, sometimes that plays a role, and sometimes it becomes a challenge to move forward in a conversation. Okay, so again, really, this is about understanding the position. So we just talked about the senior and the parent side. If you're the adult, child, or a friend, you have to recognize that position of the parent or the senior. Okay, that's number one. Continuing on that, if you're the parent or the senior, you have to recognize the position of your adult child or your friend that may be wanting to have the conversation or that you want to share that conversation with, right? So what are the understandings of that position for them? They may be feeling a sense of responsibility, which has a lot of weight. A lot of weight sits on your shoulders when you're taking that responsibility, right? There may be a sense of guilt with your adult child. They may be feeling a reversal of roles, meaning they are now the parent and they're parenting their parent, right? Which is always a strange thing to have to deal with. They have concerns and they have worries. All right. They're also facing stresses, either from work or family, or the stress of having to care for mom and dad. Right. And then part of that care is time and money. How do they offer their time away from their lives? And if money is not available from mom or dad, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, then are they up to have to pay for certain parts of that care? And that's a lot of pressure on them, right? Another position that the adult child may be in is managing sibling inequality. 2 sons and a daughter. And the daughter happens to be the go-to person for mom and dad. One of the sons still is out and about partying their lives away, and the other one is busy running a big business, right? How does the pressure on that daughter play into with the siblings? Okay, so again, you really have to understand the position of the other person. And of course, quality of life for the individual, the adult child, and then ultimately back to mom or dad, right? So if we take a moment and just think about whoever you might be, either the senior or the parent or the adult child or a friend, think about the other person that you're wanting to have a conversation with. Where do they fit in that, in that plan? Okay. And then that brings us to choice versus circumstances. We teach choice and circumstances in our accredited senior agent training program. So any of the professionals that are on the call that are ASAs, you'll remember this for sure. And basically, this breaks down to being proactive or being reactive. You have the ability to make a choice, which is proactive, or you're going to let circumstances dictate what happens next, and that's being reactive. All right. Having the choice or being proactive, you have the ability to decide what to do. You have the ability to decide where to live and how to live and how to manage your health. And you can decide on future plans and wishes. You can manage your finances. You can decide on the types of activities or the level of activity or travel. You're making those choices, right? And you also have the choice of quality of life. But a funny thing happens, and it happens a lot, more times than not, is that people are afraid of the conversation. They're afraid of planning for the future at whatever age that you're at. And for some people, they don't want to take on the stress of going through that conversation or that preparation, and they will let circumstances dictate what happens next. And that becomes very challenging. Okay. So if you are waiting and you're going to be reactive, you will lose the ability to make the choice. And that's really interesting. So circumstances dictates what happens next and what options you'll have available. And your options are going to be lessened. You will have less options if you wait for something to happen. Okay. Become more dependent or reliant on others. So now you've lost your ability to make choices, and now you're waiting or you're depending on others to help you out. Right. And that's at many different levels. It also increases the stress level for everybody. And it may also bring on a financial burden. Okay, so we suggest that you always make the choice when you can make the choice, and don't be afraid of having those conversations. But as we prepare to have conversations, these are the things that you're going to be faced with, whether you're going to have one or not have one. Okay. Avoiding or delaying conversation forces your hand to make a decision you may not have wanted to choose. So you are definitely better off to make the choice. Okay. We call it the tipping point, is when circumstances get to such a heightened level that the building blocks all of a sudden fall down. All right. It's like a game of Jenga. You get to the point, you get to the point, you get to the point, and then all of a sudden everything falls down. So you never want to get to the tipping point. You want to have these conversations as early as you can. Okay. And I'll add to that. So having the conversation doesn't mean that whatever the result of that conversation was is now etched in stone. Because you made a choice, you have the ability to go back and make changes to that conversation. Right? So it's okay. Don't be afraid of the conversation. Right? So now we're going to identify some conversation goals. So some people just want to get in there and tell the other person, this is what I want you to do, and you have to do this. And we had a great conversation, and that's what we're going to do. Let's not do that, right? Let's identify, if I'm going to have a conversation with Grace, what's the purpose of my conversation? What am I trying to get out of this? Okay. So you need to consider what you want out of it or what you want the conversation to accomplish. And a lot of times we're covering areas such as safety. Maybe mom or dad doesn't see that, maybe they're shuffling around a little bit more, or they've got a couple of extra bruises on their hips because they're banging into the edge of the counter. Maybe the stairs, daughter was over or son was over and noticed how challenging going up and down stairs were. That's a safety concern, right? So maybe the conversation is about safety, right? Maybe the conversation is about money. How am I going to finance my future retirement? Who do you talk to about that? That's a goal out of a conversation, okay? Relieving stress. We don't want to get to that tipping point. So if you feel that you're getting to a certain stress level, and you should know your levels, you don't want to go beyond that. So maybe that's what the goal of a conversation is. You don't go beyond that point. Making sure that you can express or identify your wishes, whatever that means, whether it's end of life or whether it's how you want to live your life or what your plans are or your holidays, whatever it is that one of the goals of the conversation? Okay. Maybe it's about identifying individual roles. We talked about the siblings, brothers and sisters. Maybe it's about, we need to talk about who's going to do what should something happen, or who's going to be in charge of what whenever I need them to help out. That would be a goal of a conversation. Another pertinent goal is asking for help. I'm male, obviously. Men have a tendency not to ask for help. Nope, it's okay. I don't need a map. We don't have to stop and ask for directions. I'll figure it out, right? All the ladies are laughing. Yep, we do that. That's what we do, okay? So for men especially, asking for help is a challenge. All right, so that conversation piece might be, you know what, before I get to the point where I'm going to regret this, I need to have a conversation so that I can ask for help with something, okay? Limiting outside influence, especially if it's aggressive family members or friends. Having a conversation with an aggressive family member is probably not going to have a good result, right? So trying to identify what the goal is in that conversation, you're going to have to kind of pick and choose who you converse with or how you converse with that particular person, right? And ultimately, we're looking at planning for the future, right? The goal is, what is my future as of tomorrow? What is my future going to look like? What are those goals? What are my dreams, my wishes, my wants, my needs? But more importantly, the what ifs, okay? We're dealing with older adults as an industry, but quite often the things that we talk about relate to average aged people. There are lots of people that have accidents at a young age. And the question is still, what if something happens? Okay. A 20-year-old can buy life insurance. Why would they buy life insurance? Because it's what if I should pass, then what does that insurance provide? Right. So the what if does not mean end of life or that it's because, you know, you're getting older. It's just what if things change? All right. So what does that conversation look like? Okay. Esther, I think at this point, I'm going to come off the screen. I think we're going to talk about some of those conversation pieces.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we can open that up. So let me just stop my share here.
Okay.
And we'll bring everybody back. There we go.
So there are some important things to be aware of when you're planning for the conversation. A successful conversation really has three key elements to it. Open and honest communication, planning, and patience. As Paul discussed earlier, communication should begin before circumstance forces it. And you got to keep in mind that both the senior and their children are afraid to discuss this topic, even if they both have similar fears. I've done lectures for seniors and I've done ones for children, and they both tell me the same thing. They're both afraid to broach the subject. It's probably one of the most difficult things to raise with a parent. And there's no perfect time or easy way to discuss it, but it's important to keep in mind that not talking about it doesn't make the problem go away. It pushes you towards the circumstance side of the equation and moves you away from the choice side. So the earlier you begin the conversation, the better. Early conversations allow you to know what the senior wants, or conversely allows the child to know what you want, without the pressure of needing a plan for safety's sake. It's easier to accept and deal with when the time comes if the conversation happened when the person was healthy. So when you start the conversation, there's several things you've got to keep in mind, because it is a difficult conversation. So, and this applies to both sides. It applies to the children and to the senior. Listen, be supportive, be patient, and be caring. For the child of the senior, they've got to keep in mind that this can be very scary, especially when someone is contemplating what losing their independence may look like. Conversations need to be had in person, and the location should be comfortable with limited distractions. It's always best to plan in advance. Create an agenda. Who's ever calling the meeting should be creating an agenda so they don't lose track of the conversation. We can get very easily distracted and move away from what the point is. For example, you may want to make an agenda listing your concerns, what you believe the potential needs are, what some of the options might be, and what the tasks to achieve it are. Just an example. It's really important to leave all old baggage at the door. I mean, there's all kinds of childhood issues and potentially resentments that happen within a family, and you can't let it sidetrack you. It'll just derail the whole conversation. So everybody needs to agree in advance that this isn't what it's about. It's about the safety of mom or dad, or both. It's always good to start slowly. Don't overwhelm with information or questions, and allow that time for everyone there to talk about what they're concerned about, what the issues are, what they're afraid of, and allow everybody involved to be part of the process and the solution. And in the years I worked as a social worker, it was a little bit different, because there was less of a focus on allowing the senior to make a decision. But I saw many situations where the children said, I want to be making this decision without mom or dad's knowledge. And that's a really dangerous thing. So it's really important to keep in mind that the senior must be allowed to speak and give their opinion. They should be part of the solution. They should be helping to problem solve. Everybody should be open and honest with each other. That's the only way it's going to work. And I think probably the hardest, most difficult situations were ones where there was an only child with no support trying to to navigate this on their own. So I always like to talk about teamwork and teamwork being a very helpful thing. And if you have people around you who can help, involve them, involve people that want to be there, trusted family members, and hopefully they're in agreement with your concerns, because if they're not, then it can just go the other direction. And they need to be involved in the process to assist with emotional support and practical tasks. And so whoever is taking notes should make a note of what the tasks are, what the expectations are. And often this talk takes multiple meetings. It's not something you can resolve quickly all the time. So be prepared that this is going to be a process of looking at the concerns and looking at solutions. But as Paul said, when discussion starts early, you have so much more choice. And it's likely that the senior can remain home longer with supports. If their wishes aren't known and something happens, as Paul said, if they rapidly decline or some sort of medical crisis happens, your options are a lot more limited. And a caregiver could end up making a decision that that person is not happy with. It's very hard to make a decision for somebody else if you don't know what they want. So this really helps things if you can have this conversation when the person's well, and figure out exactly where they want to be, depending on the situation. And planning ahead before the conversation is really good because it also gives you a focus. If it's possible, understand what their needs are. Figure out what their assets are and their income is so that you know the kind of funds we're talking about. Look in your neighborhood, find out what the available resources are and what the costs involved are. And when you have the conversation, focus on positive things and encourage their independence where it's possible and safe. It's always easier to come to a conclusion of we may need to relocate if you've tried everything you can to stay independent in your home. If you try and force the issue of relocation without exploring everything, it may not work out as well as it should. And when you have that conversation, focus on the greatest need right now. Don't overwhelm the person with a list of 10 things if a lot of them are minor. Learn to pick your battles. I've learned to do that with my kids, and I think it's a wonderful skill to be able to develop over time. You need to know when to compromise and when to stand firm, and know when to back down, even if it's only temporarily. The focus needs to be on the senior, not what the family needs and wants. Don't argue, don't demand, don't coerce, don't judge or criticize or be condescending. All of those things are just going to set the other person off. Stick to the facts and state your observations and concerns. Use wording like I am, not you must. So we're going to talk about conversation starters in a little bit, but just for purpose of this example, to say, Mom, I'm concerned about you is very different to saying you must go to a long-term care home. It sets the tone for the conversation and can either get the person's back up or get them comfortable talking about it. And how you approach a conversation has to do with the person. You need to know what kind of person they are. Do they need a direct approach? And if they do, express your concerns, discuss your different scenarios, and figure out with them what point they would want to relocate and get support or start talking about it, or maybe start visiting places. It's an ideal situation if somebody is open to it and is comfortable with the direct approach. But if they won't respond to it, we're going to talk to you about conversation starters in a couple of minutes to sort of get people talking. If they completely refuse to discuss it, my question to you is there somebody else who they trust that you could get involved? a doctor, a friend, a relative, a clergy person. Sometimes people don't want to discuss things with their child, but they'd be more open to having a conversation with someone else. Everybody's worried about each other, and sometimes a parent can be worried about how the child will respond. Maybe that conversation needs to be directed to somebody else that they're comfortable with. Keep in mind that your priority is going to be to ensure that they're safe while you explore the options. And sometimes, as I said, you're going to have to start with home supports to get them comfortable with the option of relocation, if that's what the ultimate solution is going to be. And I always, I always talk about the fact that when people are competent, they have the right to live at risk if they so desire. And it's a terrible thing to have to witness, but it's their right. And I know for me personally, if I'm capable and I understand a risk, I don't want to be forced to do something I don't want to do. So just because somebody is older doesn't mean that they don't understand or that they lose their rights to be independent. And there are times, unfortunately, where people insist on living at risk and are capable of understanding the implications. And in some cases, things have to get worse before anybody can intervene. So this is sort of the hardest piece to talk about for me, is when somebody is in a bad situation and they don't want to hear what options might be.
And Esther, that's the majority of calls that we get on our consulting program is a family member, an adult child, with their backs against the wall, not knowing what to do next, and then it's a desperate call, right? So we see that often. That's the majority of the calls. And once we're done this section, I've got a couple of stories to share about the opposite of that, about actually making a choice. So let's continue.
So Paul, do you have, I think we have a slide on conversation starters.
Yeah.
That
so I just want to, so it's a couple of things that came to mind as you were sharing all of that. And Grace, you can jump in on this as well. Remember the Brady Bunch?
Yeah.
Great show, right? And when there was a family meeting, Dad would call a family meeting and all the kids would come running down the stairs and they would drop everything and they'd all have a family meeting and everybody was validated. Everybody had an opinion. They all had it. Then they had a discussion. Then they figured out what the best choices were. And then they moved on from there. That's the ideal Hollywood conversation. That would be great if it was all like that. The reality is, on some parts that Esther was sharing, is that as families, we have baggage. We have a lot of resentment against other family members on many different levels, right? So sometimes having conversations with different people in the family, the personalities create a different outcome. So at the beginning, we talked about what does it look like for the adult child, what's their position, and what is the parent's position. And you have to understand who you're talking with. And that's where that comes from. And it's very challenging for most families. And Esther also talked about sometimes a third party is what's needed to have the conversation start, continue, and then end. And that's where we offer our consulting program to be able to help families have some of these more challenging conversations, right? But we've been talking a fair bit about challenging conversations, but there's also great conversations. I had a couple, I don't even think they were 65 yet. And they were concerned about being a burden on their adult children. And they didn't want to have the big house anymore. And they were looking for a more free lifestyle. And we actually showed Parkland as one of those options for them. And that's what they were looking for. And I remember her saying to me, and so a property like Parkland, we can come in, we can own the property, live like kings, beautiful, beautiful grounds, beautiful amenities, restaurants, et cetera, and should they need extra care without putting pressure on their adult children, they can call that in within the services of the building. And I was thrilled. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the ideal client. They're preparing for their future while they're still making the choice to actually enjoy what they can now, right? So the conversation, it can go both ways. Unfortunately, like Esther said, we leave it for circumstances, and then we're in a bit of a bad situation. So if you have the ability to make that choice, make the choice while you can and enjoy and increase your ability of enjoying your life and your quality of life. Right.
Yeah, I think, Paul, like you said, I mean, you're seeing a younger, I guess, older adult, because I think the one stigma when having these conversations is exactly what is retirement living, right? People, you know, quite bluntly, people think retirement living is like long-term care. It's somewhere where, you know, I am sick and that's when I have to leave. But there's really a lot of different circumstances as to why people make the move, right? And a lot of times it's you know, you've been in your familiar home for so many years. It's 2-story, a lot of maintenance, a lot of this and that. And I'm finding a trend now where, you know, people aren't moving to condos because it's one level anymore, because they're finding they perhaps in the future might have to make another move, right? Because just more peace of mind that someone's there, they're done with cooking, they're done with housekeeping. And a property like myself, Parkland, we have that continuum of care. So you know what? Come here to Parkland, live a great lifestyle life. You still do your own meals and housekeeping. And then, you know, in the future, if you need more assistance, you don't feel like doing housework, you know, I'll just have Parkland do my housekeeping and my linens, or do my meals, or heaven forbid in the future, if I have any healthcare needs, then, you know, I do have that healthcare team at Parkland to help support me in those needs, right? So I think that's the key when having this conversation too about options, is really understanding what retirement living provides for an individual.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what's, I mean, for Senior Care Access, that's why we have that database of senior housing options. You're absolutely 100% right. Most people don't know the difference between long-term care, assisted living, independent living, a continuum of care. They don't know that the options are even there, let alone what that means. So even having a conversation, a lot of people go into these conversations with incorrect information.
Yeah,
because they're basing it on either what they've heard or hearsay, or what they've read or heard in the news. And that's not the case, right?
Yeah.
That's absolutely not the case. And another point, and we deal a lot with real estate. I know there's a lot of ASAs on the call today, so they'll attest to this. If you were to purchase at Parkland, let's say, okay, you own that unit, and if you're selling your current existing property, you're going to get a windfall right now. If you're in the Mississauga area and you own a semi-detached home, you're pushing $1 million for it. If you're in a detached home, you're upwards of 1.3 and more. What are you going to do with that money? You may have never even had that much money your entire life. You may be in shock at the fact that your house is actually worth what it's worth. So to sell, gain that financial windfall, invest it correctly so that it's preserved, and buy something else, or rent, which is what retirement lifestyle is like. Well, you still have your money. It's not like you're losing all of your money, right? But basically, you're either buying or renting a lifestyle with future options. So there's nothing wrong with that. But most people don't know what's available, and they're very confused about it. So again, that's part of that conversation.
And I think that's why Senior Care Access exists. That's why my role as a lifestyle consultant is to help those that reach out to us to determine, you know, what retirement life is all about, and kind of dispel any myths out there.
Yeah, awesome. So Esther, let's get into some of the conversation starter examples. I'm just going to share my screen again. Do you see the screen? Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect. So a couple of starters. These are just examples, okay, just to help you get your creative juices going. You'll pick and choose as to who you want to talk to, which family member, what position that they're in, etc. Right? So adult child concerned about mom or dad. Maybe ask for help. Put it on you as opposed to putting it on mom or dad. Okay, so it might go something like this. Dad, I need your help with something. What's dad going to say? No? Of course he's going to say yes. What is it? Right?
Mhm.
So, Dad, I need your help with something that's concerning me. Oh, geez, Grace, what is it? What's going on?
Mhm.
Conversation started. Okay. Dad, I need your help with, or I need clarity on, Mom, I heard Mom mention that, you did this and that and that. Could you explain to me what was happening there or what your plans are with that? Conversation starter. Okay. If mom and dad maybe haven't shared their wishes and you want to get that conversation going, Dad, I need your help with regarding your wishes. Help me to understand what you're planning so I can be there for you. Right? That's a very different conversation starter than, have you guys made plans on what you guys want to do after, so-and-so dies? Really? That's the conversation starter? No, that's going nowhere fast.
Mhm.
That's not where you want to be, right? Another one, adult child to mom. Mom, I was on a webinar today and it got me thinking,
Mhm.
right? Great opener, non-threatening, just open up that conversation, right? I think you could really benefit from an active retirement lifestyle while maintaining your investments and independence. What? Sign me up. Right? That's a great conversation starter. Okay. I've used this in the past. I use this with clients. It's a bit of a trick, but it's a great way to very casually get things going. And it's almost an emotional set. Okay. Could we take some time and look at the family albums? It's been a while. Put yourself in that emotional state, sitting with mom or dad or your adult children and going through family albums. What are you feeling? You're relaxed, you're calm, you want to share, you're going to tell stories, it's going to go somewhere. And it's a great way to open up a conversation, a non-threatening conversation.
I would even ask stories about, because there's going to be pictures of grandparents, assume.
Yeah.
I would even ask for stories about what happened with that person and if things could have been done differently. Grandma went to a nursing home, really what led to that? And do you think if things had turned out differently, she would have been able to go to a retirement home? Or did you ever consider a retirement home? Or did you ever talk about her wishes when she was a bit younger? I think you use that as a jumping point as well.
And that exact conversation is on the far right of either. I was thinking about Tony's situation and it got me thinking about his fall or the isolation that they're feeling, right? So if, like Esther said, you're talking about grandma or Aunt Judy or whoever it is, that's really interesting about that story about Aunt Judy. I wonder, have you ever given any thought to, that situation? And that's an opener. But the opener is based on somebody else's experience, right? You're not putting fear into somebody.
I often will talk to people about, is there somebody that because you always hear the story of so-and-so's father had a fall, ended up in hospital, and then went to a nursing home. And even being able to share that and say, you remember my friend so-and-so, this is what happened to his dad. It got me thinking, and it kind of scared me that they didn't have any plans in place. Right. So it's always good if it's somebody else that you're talking about first that starts things off.
Even the stigma of nursing home. I mean, like we don't use those terms in our business. No. But those are the terms that people are accustomed to. And when you think about the person that you saw in a nursing home, that's the last place you want to be. But that's not what we're talking. That's not what Parkland offers.
Yeah.
This is about making a lifestyle choice, not being forced or under circumstances not having a choice to make, right? So two totally different types of conversations. I'm just being cautious of time here. So as an individual, this would be maybe of the senior themselves, wanting to open up conversation with their children. I think it's important that I share what's important to me about my future health or my future finances or my end of life wishes, right? That's always a scary thing to talk about. Can we set up a time to discuss, right? Right now I'm good, but as I think about getting older, I want to make things easier for you and your sister. I don't want to be a burden to you guys. So I would really like to share some thoughts that I have and see what your opinion is on what I'm thinking. Great conversation starter. Okay. Here's one for a family that, butts heads a lot. I know things haven't been great between us, but I need you to know that I've written my wishes should something happen. And now you're not sharing the details of it. You're just letting them know that I've prepared something. Should something happen, either call the lawyer or call Uncle Tony or go in the closet and pull out the banker's box. And all you're doing is saying, hey, I don't want to bring up the fight, but here's where the information is, right? Now that I am getting older, I want to be sure you are clear and comfortable with my wishes, okay? Now that I am recovered from a diagnosis, I want to be sure you are clear and comfortable with my wishes. Now that I am a widow or widower, I want you to be sure that you are clear and comfortable with my wishes. So again, different levels of conversation requirements, right? So you'll pull from this, whatever it is that, whatever part of the plan that you need to pull from. I've been thinking about the house and I think I can improve my quality of life while still securing your inheritance. I'm wondering if I could share my thoughts. If I'm the son, I'm like, hey, yeah, inheritance, that's cash for me. I'm in the conversation. That's an easy way to, that's right. But that's an easy way to get the conversation started. Doesn't mean you're going anywhere. You just want them at the table to have the conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna approach wrapping up here. So a lot of people, when they engage with us on consulting, they have a massive project that they're very worried about trying to manage. And one of the examples, and I'm sure you've all heard this, is how do you eat an elephant? I don't suggest anybody eats an elephant, but I'm just saying that's the saying. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Okay, that exemplifies the fact that there's such a big task to have to take on. How do you do that? Well, you just take it on at small pieces at a time, right? And sometimes that view of all that has to happen is so overwhelming for certain family members, they avoid a conversation. But that doesn't get to the result, right? So you may, whoever's in charge of that conversation, you may want to present it in smaller, manageable pieces, as opposed to the whole big picture. Okay. Yeah. So basically, prepare yourself. Be in a clear frame of mind. Don't come to it angrily or with a preconceived notion as to, well, this isn't going to go well. Like, just keep it clear, keep it light. Okay. Prepare for some resistance. You're not looking for a fight, but if you need information, make sure you have supporting information to what it is that you're presenting, and keep it simple. Like Esther said, don't complicate it. Not too many questions. Okay. And come from a place of empathy and genuine care or interest. This is about you, not necessarily about me. Right. Okay, so I think we're going to wrap up the actual presentation, but I just want to share just as we close out. So we offer at Senior Care Access, we offer a consulting program to help families, seniors themselves, People come to us from different points in life. And we have 11 consultants able to work with people across Canada. And we cover certain topics such as starting the conversation and having that conversation and maintaining it, retirement home search, transitions and placements. Okay, so you would end up working with a consultant to manage all of that. Empty nest planning, dementia programs, cohabitation of seniors or families, leaseback programs, real estate, transitions, downsizing, out of province service referral programs, adult children struggling and trying to manage with aging parents, the need for accessibility, financial review and preservation, okay, which is a big piece, healthcare navigation, healthcare advocacy. We have some clients that come and just want us to basically support them as they go through certain processes. We're not actually doing anything, but they call us and rely on us for information, right? So it all depends on what you need, but we have the ability to help families out. Okay, Esther, quick plug for Senioropolis.
So we've relaunched Senioropolis, turned it into a blog site about senior living. So our homes that are part of Senior Care Access contribute articles, and you can learn all kinds of things about what it's like to live in a retirement community. And the articles rotate frequently. We have daily puzzles on the website. We have a daily joke that rotates several times a day. So check it out. It's free for users, and it'll give you a different perspective on senior living and the kinds of programs that they offer.
I know Parkland, we do our blogs on there. So definitely that's one way to find out about life here at Parkland and everything we have to offer.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So before we close off, just again, Esther and Paul, this was awesome, great information that you guys provided. Definitely, I did learn a thing or two, you know, being in this business for quite a few years, and Esther and I have known each other, oh my gosh, dare I say, over a decade, with this. But just want to know if anyone here on the call now have any questions for Esther and Paul at all that they would like to ask. Anyone, hands up or anything?
I know we had a question earlier and they weren't able to be on the call, so we'll get to that one. But by all means, any questions, concerns, now is the time.
Yeah. Or you just were so good. That's
That's
what
it.
it is.
That's what I like to say. We covered everything. We were so good. Nobody has any questions.
Exactly. Well, if people are being a bit shy, you know, we'll have at the end, you know, an email if you want to pass on some questions. I can definitely pass that on to Esther and Paul to reach out to you. I know it's a very broad question, Paul and Esther, but you know, we were talking about starting the conversation, but how do you broadly advise someone, as I was asked, how to close the conversation or end the conversation?
Mm-hmm.
I think the conversation takes a while. I don't think it's something that you can close quickly, and I think that you have to take your cues from the senior. It could, I mean, if you've started the conversation, it means they're willingly listening, hopefully. To what you have to say. And so maybe you need to move things forward in order to come to a conclusion or a final decision. So maybe if the conversation is, maybe you need to consider looking at retirement, maybe then you have a tour of a retirement home, or you have a conversation with somebody like yourself, Grace. It could mean that it takes a couple of visits or a lunch or two, or talking to residents who live in a particular home. It could take a while. Like, I don't think it's something people decide quickly. You and I both know that, listen, I had a call from somebody, 2 people in the last 2 weeks, You know, I used to do the book. I had a call from somebody who had a 15-year-old book and now decided that they wanted to move. Did I have an update? And then somebody else who had a 10-year-old book. So
Wow.
these are people who have been thinking this conversation for many years. And something must have happened to make them say, now I need to get serious about this. So sometimes it's something that has to happen that pushes it.
Yeah.
I don't think you can force it. I think,
No.
right?
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. You may want it to come to a conclusion quickly, but that person may not be ready. Paul, you have thoughts?
My addition to that would be that you would have to follow up with any of the results of the conversation. So if there's, 2 or 3 pieces of that conversation, what do you do with that? Well, you should follow up on it so that you can maintain the conversation so it can grow, right?
Yeah.
So you can build on that. If the question was, which I think is where this question was coming from, Mom, Dad, I'm concerned about you being at home. I would really like you to consider a retirement lifestyle. I think that's where that question was coming from. And then where does that go? Well, where does it go? What was the result of the conversation? Was it, heck no, I'm not leaving until I'm out in a pine box? We get that all the time, right? Or was it, well, we can talk about this another time, or we gave it some thought, but we haven't come up with a decision yet. Whatever the conversation led to, you would then continue on that. Take that little bite and then just grow on it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's, listen, I know based on our last conversation, the idea of going to a retirement lifestyle was in question. I took it upon myself and I contacted 3 properties that I think might be a good fit. Here are the brochures.
Yeah.
That's it. Keep it simple. You don't have to like, oh, okay, let's start packing. We're going and we're going to do. Just start building on it if that's what the goal is. But the key to this is you can't force the other person your opinion.
Yeah.
Why does the daughter want mom and dad into a retirement lifestyle? Is it for selfish reasons? Well, then maybe mom and dad shouldn't be going to a retirement lifestyle. Is it for genuine reasons? Yes, we should look at that, right? So again, the conversation, it's so involved, but each conversation is different. No 2 are the same.
No. Yeah.
So to answer that is you need to build up on what was already said.
Yeah. So bite by bite, that elephant will get smaller and smaller, right? So only the carcass will be left.
But I don't want to leave everybody on that thought. No.
Right? But anyways, you got to add some humor to it. Anyway, so just being mindful of time. So again, I want to thank Paul and Esther for everything that you shared with us today. Definitely, if you have some questions, please follow up. And I just want to let everyone know about upcoming Parkland Live sessions. Next week, we have a great one, mindfulness and being present. And actually, it's one of our residents at one of our properties out east who will be doing that. And then to follow up on starting the conversation, we're going to be having another luncheon sort of series on May 27th. Which is knowing when to sell. So you've had the conversation. So what are the next steps now? So we're going to be having that live session on the 27th. And then to finish off the series on June 10th, we're going to be talking to appraiser to seek the advice as to, is it junk or is it treasure? Right? So some people may be surprised or not. And you can register, as you see below, at experienceparkland.com. Or there'll be a lot of social media and email blasts that you can register. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. I hope that you found the conversation that we had this afternoon very helpful. And again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you again so much, Esther and Paul, for taking some time today. It was greatly appreciated. Thank you so much.
Excellent.
For having us, Grace.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for being on the call.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday and hope to see you at another session.